the both of you can overcome the anger and start working cooperatively, that would be the best way to get to spend as little money, to spend as little of your children's inheritance and your own retirement and the children's college fund on legal proceedings and on lawyers.
How much does it cost to get divorced? Well, that's what we're going to ask the lawyer today. Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and my guest is attorney Chaim Steinberger in New York City. Chaim, thank you for making some time to answer our questions today.
It's always my pleasure to join you, Rob.
I'm guessing this is a hard question. There's probably a lot of things that go into this, but let's talk about how much does a divorce cost? What are some of the factors, first of all, that might go in and to determine that?
Well, as you intimated, it's very complicated. It depends on so many things. But the first question is, how reasonable are the parties? If you have one party that's unreasonable, it can spiral out of control and it can take long. So sometimes, normally, the simple answer is that it depends on the complexity of the divorce. But one of my longest, most viciously battled divorces was a divorce where the people had no money to fight over. And he was a gas station attendant making $3.25 an hour, and she swept the local parochial school at night. And yet, when we got divorced, he told her, we've got two televisions. Let me, you keep one, I'll take the other. And she's like, no, my mother's getting the second television. And then we were off and running to the races. So if both parties are reasonable and they can find a reasonable resolution and they both listen to reason, then usually good lawyers can help them, guide them, and help them reach a settlement that makes sense for them in the long term. So it's the reasonableness of the people, the complexity of the issue. Sometimes you just have complex issues, sure, and it costs money. So if I can help my client overcome that, if somehow talking through the other lawyer and in conversations, I can help the other side overcome the anger so that they are more reasonable, so that they do what's good for them in the long term. Because ultimately, especially if you have children, the children need both parents. And they're going to want both parents to walk them down the aisle, God willing. And they're going to want both parents to participate in their when they make happy occasions, when they have a child. And so the best thing for most people is to figure out a way to work together, to work collaboratively, to work cooperatively. And the only way that can happen is if we overcome our grievances, our hurt. I'm fond of saying that the character is destiny and people are who they are. I mean, oftentimes we marry somebody, we know exactly who they are. We expect them to change. And when they don't change, when they keep being the person we married them for, we become angry. Why couldn't you change? Why couldn't you be the person I wanted you to be? And it's this anger that propels people and makes them fight. If we can find a way to dissipate the anger and then sit down and rationally talk about it, figure out what's really important to you, and help you get what you really need in the long term, so that you're happy with the result, not just today, but also in 5 years from now, you go, I made some smart choices. So letting go of anger and overcoming, maybe you use a therapist. People tell me I sound more like a therapist than a lawyer. And if the both of you can overcome the anger and start working cooperatively, that would be the best way to get to spend as little money, to spend as little of your children's inheritance and your own retirement and the children's college fund on legal proceedings and on lawyers.
So you've been doing this for a little while, Chaim. So you say if both parties are reasonable. This is sort of a two-part question. How often do you find in your experience that both parties are reasonable? And is it often maybe they're not reasonable at the beginning, but what I hear you saying is maybe by the time things really get going, you're able to make it where they both can be reasonable?
Exactly. That's very well put, Rob. And I know judges who make parties come into the courtroom at every court appearance because the judge says, I find that after I've called the parties in and they've spent 5, 6, 10, 15 mornings in the courtroom sitting around twiddling their thumbs, they become more reasonable. But I take a different approach. I try to understand why people are angry and try to give them. Usually people are doing, I'm a big believer in Dale Carnegie, and every person takes the only choice. They make the only decision they believe is available to them. Mm-hmm. So if one party did something wrong, let's understand why they did it wrong. What happened in their childhood? What happened? I don't have to be angry at my spouse for being the person they want to be. You remind me of the story of the woman who came in and railed against her husband, how he leaves his socks and he's unreliable, and he smokes pot and he can't hold a job. And after she rants for about half an hour, I said, by the way, why did you marry him? And she goes, well, he was such a free spirit. And I felt like saying, well, there you have it. You got exactly what you signed up for.
Right.
So if I can help my client overcome that, if somehow sitting in a four-way negotiation, me with my client, the other side with their lawyer, and I can somehow minimize the temperature, sort of cool off the temperatures, and get back to basics and say, let's focus on the children. Let's focus on what you really want. We all want to come out of this. Look, if the marriage, too often we're really angry and we look to get revenge immediately. But if we focus, okay, how many years do you have left? 30, 40, 50 years left? What do you want those 50 years to look like? How do we set you up in such a way that you get there? People so often fight because they don't think they have a choice. They don't want to let go. They're not yet emotionally ready to let go. And I tell clients, if your spouse isn't emotionally ready to get divorced, what can we do? This is sort of like game theory. I can only control my side, but by controlling my side, I might have an effect on the other side. So what can I do to help your spouse get emotionally ready to get divorced, to get ready to understand, okay, this is happening. And once they make that psychological adjustment, now they might be ready to start talking and working cooperatively on it.
Let's talk about contested divorces and uncontested divorces, what that means, and I'm assuming an uncontested would in the long run be less expensive than a contested?
So in an uncontested divorce, maybe the parties reach a resolution and then the lawyers prepare a set of papers and submit it to the court, and the court just signs off on the divorce, their divorce. They don't ever have to show up in court. They don't ever have to go back in. So that part, people often will ask me, how long does a divorce take? But it's not really the divorce. Usually it's reaching an agreement. So once we reach a settlement agreement, getting the deal papered, papering up a deal that sounds good. If you have a term sheet, that might be fine. But the devil is in the details. And sometimes when you write it up, you can still have hours, days, months of wrangling over the wording and exactly how. But once you get the paper, once you get the deal signed and notarized, then it just becomes a ministerial process for the courts to push the papers through the system. So as far as legal fees go, that's the best way of doing things. But it's creating the divorce. In other words, it's finding out what's going on and what is a fair resolution. So I've had people come to me. I've had this woman come to me who says, I'm 58, I'm getting ready to retire, but I don't have any money to live on. And I say, what do you mean? And she goes, well, my husband worked for a big corporation for 40 years while we were married, and he accumulated a huge pension. And I said, well, didn't you get a piece of that pension when you got divorced? And she said, no. And I said, why not? She said, well, my husband said it was all his. And I looked at her, I said, and what did your lawyer say? And she goes, well, I didn't have a lawyer. We just used a mediator. And I can imagine a mediator would say, well, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But if she didn't realize she was giving up one of her rights, she was giving up something that the law entitled her to, and therefore she might be giving up her ability to retire, and she may have to work until old age. And so sometimes the cheapest lawyer is not really the cheapest lawyer. When you make a deal, you want to make sure it's smart now, but smart in the future. And very often people come to me and say, we've reached a deal. And I'm like, okay, before you move forward, let's sit down and talk about it. Let me explain to you how this provision that seems innocuous to you now, how it plays out over the course of 5 or 10 years. Or let me tell you what the law is to make sure if you want to waive your right, if you know you have a right and you want to waive it, that's fine. Clients walk away from things they're entitled to all the time. So long as they do it knowingly, so long as they know what their rights are and they choose to walk away from it. I wouldn't forgive myself if a client made a misstep because they didn't realize they had a right. That to me is unacceptable. So in uncontested divorce, again, you need a lawyer to review it, but not just to review. Somebody said, let me send you the document, you can review it. I'm like, no. I need you to tell me, before I review it, I want you to tell me what you think it says. I want to know all of the facts and circumstances of your life so that when I review the document, I can make sure that it says exactly what you think it says, and so that I can warn you about other rights and obligations you might have that this agreement doesn't give you or protect you from. So it sounds like it's simple, and the lawyers who say, well, I can do it, for $299, but they may hurt. I tell people the two things you hope never to need is a doctor and a lawyer. But if you need one, you need the best you can afford, because a bad doctor and a bad lawyer is worse than no doctor and no lawyer. So you want somebody who's going to protect you. You want somebody who's going to guide you. You want somebody who can understand the long-term effect of what it says there. So even though it seems innocuous to you, make sure you're not falling into a pitfall. But if you have that, if it is a simple matter, if you have your rights protected and you can sign an agreement, then the lawyers just have to draft the papers. It takes me about 3 hours to draft a set of divorce papers. It takes me about 3 hours to draft a settlement agreement. And then we can submit it to the court, and it goes through as a matter of course without a lot of fanfare, without a lot of cost.
Which brings to mind the question, Chaim, how do divorce lawyers charge? Is it how do the fees work? Is there a retainer involved? How does that work? Walk us through that.
So good lawyers charge an hourly fee, and the reason for that is because I don't want to charge you for time I'm not going to spend on your matter.
Right.
And so I want to be fair to every client, and the only way I found to be fair is by charging every client for my time that they use. And so if I were to charge a flat rate fee, I would have to increase the fees for those people who use up less time so that they cover the overage that the other person uses. And I don't think that's fair. So every time I've tried a flat fee, somebody has gotten hurt. Either I've charged somebody too much and that they shouldn't have paid, or I got hurt because I had to devote a lot more time than I needed to. So I don't do that. I try to keep my fees as low as I can. I spend tens of thousands of dollars in most typical years sort of staying on top of my game, studying the law, attending conferences so that I know the latest and greatest of the techniques to use. And I have a nice office in Midtown Manhattan, and so of course I have overhead on that. And I tell people I don't try to be the cheapest lawyer out there. I do try to be the best. There are people that advertise flat rate divorce for X dollars. I don't see how it can be done, because invariably things pop up, and then I feel like I'm nickeling and diming you. Oh, you want this? It's like when you buy a new car. Oh, you want headlights? That's another $500. Oh, you want brakes? That'll be another $2,000. It's like, look, let me take care of you. I'll charge you a fair price. I'll give you a fair hour's work for a fair price, and I'll charge you just what I need. Now, as far as retainers go, I usually ask for twice what I think I'm going to devote in one month. So if I think it's a simple case and I'll put in about $3,000 a month, I might ask for a $6,000 retainer. If it's a complex matter and I'll be putting in $20,000 worth of work a month, I might ask for a $40,000 retainer. So that all depends on what it is and how complex it is and how much time I'll have to devote to it. And perhaps if something's about to blow up and we need a lot more time for it, I might ask for something as we go along, say, okay, we're entering a new phase, you're going to have to supplement your retainer. But like I said, I try to be fair to the people working for me, fair to my suppliers, fair to the people that I'm working for. I want to be fair all around.
It's always an interesting conversation when we talk, Chaim. Thank you for spending some time and answering our questions again.
You're very welcome. It's always my pleasure, Rob.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been New York City attorney Chaim Steinberger. If you'd like the best information, or you'd like to be able to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, make sure to go to askthelawyers.com. Also, please take a sec to like, share, and subscribe by clicking the right button below. Thanks for watching. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com.